Maybe test. Yep.
There we go.
All right, well, let's start. We're going to be talking about these ideas of mental and emotional wellness tonight. We're going to be talking about the ideas of emotional resilience. We're going to be talking about fostering deeper connection on and off the field. But I want to start first with, obviously, I teed up Dr. Sills in your youth sports career. Talk a little bit about the changes you've seen in youth sports over the last 5-10 years, and maybe from the negative perspective is maybe what's alarming you of how you see some of maybe the professional behaviors rolling down into the youth leagues maybe too soon. And then also with that, how can we kind of keep amateurs, if you will?
Yeah, it definitely has changed. So over the time that I've been coaching, I've seen this just really significant change in a couple things. One is just the year-round nature of sports. And Ben and I were talking about this a minute ago. You know, you've got 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids now that are being asked to play at a competitive, high sort of travel level, maybe 10, 11, 12 months out of the year. And when you play that much, you're going to have some physical breakdown, right? You're going to have some overuse and other injuries. And so I think that then just compounds the problem, because now you're like, oh gosh, I got to sit out a season because, you know, I've got to let this injury heal. So that has definitely been a big piece of it. I think social media has been a big piece of it too, right? Everybody wants to put the highlight of them hitting a home run and, you know, tossing the bat and doing all of this. But, you know, nobody wants to show the 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts. And so there's a lot of pressure, I think, that athletes start to feel, because now instead of kind of just playing their sport and enjoying being with their buddies, now they feel like they're out there. And we're streaming games all the time now, right? You can watch games of 12-year-olds on Game Changer live stream and all this. So it just feels like those pressures are increased. And then lastly, I'd say the recruiting piece, right? More and more kids have felt like that happens earlier, and if they're not committed to a school by the time they're starting a certain point in their career, then they're left behind. And so I think that generates tons of pressure on kids and on families as they're kind of in this journey. And, you know, that's happening concurrent, John, at the same time when your body is changing so much, right? You're still growing into this body, and now I got all these awkward things that I'm trying to move through. So having time to develop, time to pursue other hobbies, and still have a childhood and a family life somewhere in there, I think is really challenging. And that, to me, is the biggest change in 2025 than when I started this almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, the sports specialization, if you actually want to read like what one of the biggest myths is that sports specialization will actually produce a professional career. It's actually very rare. I mean, you look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, he's playing multiple sports up until college, sometimes even in college, but I overheard a conversation before we even got started, is now with the NIL money, when athletes are being pressured to only play one sport. But you miss out. We had a podcast series with a gal by the name of Christy Hayes. Her husband, Jonathan Hayes, was an NFL player for 15 years. All 4 of her kids are playing college sports. Her son, Jackson Hayes, plays for the Lakers. So she has a family of athletes. And she said, we mandated multiple sport participation mainly for the development of their bodies. When you got to play multiple sports, you worked out different muscles. And she said it seemed to work out decently to kind of where it's taken our family. But Ben, I want to ask you about that, because you and I have talked about how specializing in one sport, but how do you maintain a sense of who you are outside of achievement? And I know you have a big passion for saying, you know, I played baseball, I'm not a baseball player. And the difference in identity. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's first of all, it's very difficult if you're 10, 11, 12 and you're trying to distinguish yourself and find yourself. Whatever you end up being passionate about outside of school is where you generally find your identity. It's either in a group of people, a social group, or it's in a music or sports, or some of these could be the arts. There's some of these things that we get involved in that form the foundation for our identity. And the difficult thing with that is if you end up being really good at that at those ages, well, you stay only doing that, and now it's just you just do more and more and more of that one thing. Whereas I think it used to be, oh, well, I'm pretty good at that, and I'm not so good at this, but I still like it because my friends do it, and also my family has us do this, and we do that. You know, there's just a lot of different things, activities. Well, now, so many activities, right? Or so much time in that one activity. And so I think identity-wise, I was really blessed that my dad's a pastor, and so it was kind of like, look, we're glad that you love sports, but it's never going to rule our family, and we hope it never rules your life, right? And I'll be the first to say it has at times ruled my life because I was doing it so much. It's very difficult to not put everything into that. But I always had that perspective from my primary caretakers, right? And secondary attachment figures, coaches, people in my community where I grew up in Illinois, small town, blue collar people. No one in our town thought I was going to make it pro. It was just like, oh, he's a good athlete. So we've had a lot of good athletes that come through here, and then they end up being farmers or, whatever they end up doing around there at times. And so it was always, hey, this is just a part of your life, and enjoy it while you can. But we're going to learn how to work really, really hard in whatever you do. And at the end of the day, you go home and you're just Ben. You're not number 18, or number 12 or whatever number I was wearing. And I think it's really difficult nowadays to separate and have a sense of identity outside of that main activity.
Real quick trivia question. How many college scholarship offers did Ben Zobrist have coming out of high school? Yeah, you in the back. That's right, 0. That's right. So anybody that doesn't feel like they have hope for the future in their sport and has 0 college scholarship offers, just don't give up if that's what you want to pursue, because you never know when those times are going to change and things are going to develop. Ben, I want you to talk briefly about your, 2016 happened. 2015, you won the World Series. You jump right into free agency. You head to Chicago. 2016, you guys have the best record in baseball. You go through the playoffs. You win the World Series. You weren't really the guy. There was a lot of other all-stars on that team. I mean, a lot of other bigger personalities. You had 5,000 media requests in 48 hours. Your life was turned upside down. Talk a little bit about that mental health struggle, and then as well as your earlier mental health struggles, maybe in the 08, 09 timeframe.
Yeah, so when all that happened, it was obviously a crazy time of my life, and there was a lot that came at me immediately. 5,000 requests within 2 days of winning the World Series, and all the stuff that I was not accustomed to. Some of the other guys in the major leagues may have been. I was not. So here I was, 35 years old, 36, kind of figured I was kind of on the decline, but just wanting to win World Series, and now I get thrust into the limelight. So it forced me into a scenario where I had to deal with a lot more than I expected to deal with. Okay, and I think, yeah, it's hard for anybody else to understand what that might be like because, what was that like? And I can tell you all the details around it, but the reality is we all have moments that just push us into more than we not only were expecting, but more than we're capable of handling. And so although it was good from the outside, it put a lot on me. It felt like weight that I had to carry. Now I'm the World Series MVP for the Cubs, and I wanted to say yes to everything, and I didn't have healthy boundaries, and all that stuff that it was hard for me to just be Ben, because everybody saw me as Ben Zobrist, number 18 for the Cubs, who won the World Series at that moment, right? Now, there was a previous time in my career that you wanted me to say something about, which was more of a time where I was challenged with, maybe this isn't the career for me. I had gotten sent down. I had been told I wasn't good enough to play at that level. I had put so much of my heart and soul into this that I was like, what am I doing? Like, I don't want to be traveling the country in AAA and just, I just want to go home. Like, I really just felt like this is not what I want to be doing with my life. Let me go start something else. And it was a time where it just kind of hit me hard. Like, I didn't want to be doing what I was doing. And I think that's another normal thing for athletes to go through in various seasons. When you're pursuing something that is very, very competitive, there's going to be seasons where you're either injured and thinking, maybe I will never be the same, or maybe I just don't have what it takes to play at this next level, or maybe I have imposter syndrome because I just had some great success and I never thought I was going to be at this level. And I had all those things that happened and kind of forced me to really reevaluate how I saw myself, how I dealt with that stuff that was coming in from the outside. And I had a lot of inner work to do. And we'll get into that a little bit.
And one thing we talk about a lot at Champion Forward is helping to process and understand feelings. How can we teach people to process and understand feelings? Because most of the time in our life, we're called to repress because we need to perform. And so I'm going to get into more of Ben's story on that. But I want to talk about one thing that is so heartbreaking for many, and that's why Bone and Joint is here, a lot of other places are here, is injury. How many of you have experienced injury yourself, or somebody kind of within the first degree had an injury in sports? Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Pat Lawson. I'm looking at his son, Will. I mean, last year was so hard on his son, the injury. And so now I want to talk to Dr. Looney, because Dr. Looney, I've heard you speak before with the APAF, and I know this is such a big part of your focus, not only just as a surgeon, but really you feel like as a calling to shepherd people through this. And talk about the team-based approach and how you even start having conversations when an injury like this happens to athletes.
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me talk. You know, as an orthopedic surgeon and a sports medicine doc, you know, just as Scott was alluding to, a lot of the times when we first kind of have a face-to-face interaction with a patient is right at the point of their greatest disappointment, right? They just find out, you know, they just find out they tore their ACL. And that's sort of the critical point of interaction for us as physicians, is that moment. And because, you know, as you alluded to, and as you were talking about in youth sports, so many of our athletes find their identity now through their sport. You can see it on, you know, you can see it on the face even when you walk in, and you know the conversation you're going to have, and so when we talk, you know, when we talk about injury, I first of all acknowledge that this isn't an injury to your knee. This is an injury to you. This affects your whole being, and acknowledging that, you know, somewhere along the way, you may feel pretty down about this. And I say that, you know, whether it's an ACL or whether it's, you know, a shoulder dislocation that needs surgery, about 50% of, you know, athletes will have a major depressive episode while recovering from this event, whether they're a professional athlete or whether they're an adolescent. And that's half of us. So, I tell them, you know, that's not something insignificant. And there's 4 ways that I kind of want us to focus on that. One is listen, we've got a problem. We're going to fix it. And this is a season-ending injury, not a career-ending injury. And I need you to keep your goals very short, you know, short term. You know, I don't want you to just think about the light at the end of the tunnel. You know, when I was with Ben, you know, Michael Phelps spoke at where we play, and he kept all his goals on the mirror, 1 week goals that he checked off. And I tell my athletes, keep your goals short term. You know, the first week it's just, let's get your motion back, let's get the swelling down. And if you keep your goals short term and you kind of keep checking those boxes, everything seems obtainable. The second point I make is that this is a collaborative team experience. Just like you were, you know, you're on the team. The people taking care of you is not just me. It's a team. It's your physical therapist. Mm-hmm. You're often the athlete is most intimate with their physical therapist because they're seeing them 3 times to 5 times a week, and their coaches, their athletic trainers, and it's that collaborative experience that's going to get you through this. And you find that key support person in there, and grab onto them as you alluded to that it's important to have someone outside the family. The third thing is just knowing that, like, at any point during this, if you're having problems, let's communicate to that person on the team. Mm-hmm. You know, make sure that you let them know, hey, I feel down. I don't know what it is. I've never felt like this. I'm not enjoying things. I'm playing video games, and I don't even like that. I'm just sitting around, and I don't want to go on Friday night to the field and watch my team. I'm just something's different, and making sure you communicate that. And then the third thing and the fourth thing of the key points is that, you know, I make sure I'm available as to my athletes. I'll say you can get in touch with me. You can get in touch with me on a Saturday, Sunday, whenever. You can come. You know, you call me, you text me, and know that I'm going to help you. And if I can't help you, I'm going to make sure you get help. But and so I think, you know, those four things. You know, acknowledging that there is the potential for mental illness during this. I think athletes feel a lot better talking about it. They don't feel like there's a stigma anymore. That if you say this is part of the process and feeling bad about it might be part of the process.
Yeah, it sounds like you said 50% of the injuries will have a major depressive disorder, so I'd imagine that's even higher. So if you haven't yet, now's a great time to grab your journal. Those were 4 great things to write down from Dr. Looney. You said number 1, having your first one.
The first one is keeping your goals.
Your goals,
very,
your
very
short-term goals.
Short-term.
I do remember Michael Phelps referencing that, of having those goals on the mirror, the short-term goals.
Well, I learned that. I mean, I learned that from, you know, when we went to the, you know, where we play APA event is Michael Phelps said, listen, just put them on your mirror. Make it a weekly thing and check it off. Because if all you're thinking about is getting back on the field in 9 months, that's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around.
Yeah, we talked. I'm going to ask you about hope because we talked about that before we got started. But you said, you said number 2. What I love was the collaborative approach. You're there for them, and you also, you know, TSA. We always hear if you see something, say something type deal. Like if you feel something, talk about it. And I think that's where we're trying to figure out where are the places we can talk about the things that we're feeling, and we can maybe not get a huge reaction. And that's something Ben and I do regularly. If you've been a part of Champion Forward at all, that's what we talk about is where can you find a place to just process what you're feeling? Because he even referenced it, and we kind of laughed tongue in cheek, but, you know, I'm just not really enjoying playing video games. I'm not really feeling up to that. Well, that could be circumstantial, but have some serious repercussions to just start talking about it. And having someone to be able to talk to can be really important. I was talking to Dr. Sills before we got started, and he said a theme that I have seen across the board in all of his medical career is the importance of having hope as a patient, regardless of where you find yourself. So can you talk a little bit about building off what Dr. Looney said around hope and having a hope for I love the phrase you said, this is a season-ending injury, not a career-ending injury. And I think what's happened is the instant gratification culture has rolled over into if it's not going to happen now, it's never going to happen. But talk a little bit about how you've maybe seen that even at the professional level of having hope to return from a serious injury.
Yeah, listen, I think hope is essential in everything we do in medicine. And I mentioned that, you know, in my non-sports world, I take care of a lot of patients that have brain tumors. Okay, and obviously they're very sick, and sometimes those are really challenging. But, you know, it's been my experience, whether it's cancer patients or athletes, hope is an essential part of recovery, right? It's what gets us out of bed every day to do things that we do, that we're passionate about, that we believe in. And so I think, like Colin said, it's hard on day 1, 2, 3, right, to have that hope, right? You're thinking about, I'm going to miss this game, right, or I'm going to miss the playoffs, or I was about to do this. And so that really, your ordered life, your kind of structured routine, right, that you have as an athlete now, that's completely broken. And so it's like, okay, what is there now, you know? And now I've got to find kind of that new normal. But, you know, I think this is where it can be incredibly helpful, again, talking to these figures or, you know, somebody like a healthcare professional that's seen this journey and says, okay, I know where you are today, right? I know where you can be in 6 weeks, but I really know where you can be in 6 months or a year, you know, and that's the vision I need you to have, is not today or next week or that game, but I need you to have that vision that's down the road. I think that's just an essential part of the process. And one piece of that can help is talking to other athletes who've been through that, right? Somebody else that's been through that journey and now is back out on the other side, because I think we don't often know about that. But those athletes, we see them when they come back, right? Okay, he's back from Tommy John surgery and he's out here. Nobody sees that down period he went through, right? Nobody sees those dark days and the loneliness and the isolation. So I think that there can be some mentorship and some coaching that goes on there, and really some care that's not physician-led, but that's kind of co-passengers, if you will, in the athlete journey.
Ben and I talk about that a lot, is when you look at the therapeutic world right now, the amount of trained professionals is not increasing at a rate fast enough to keep up with the demand. So that's where we really see our organization fitting in, is how do we continue to help what I would call the typical first responders, athletic trainers, parents, coaches, be that first line of defense to be able to help process and understand the feelings around a failure or even around a success. And how do you start having conversations around things such as disordered eating or anxiety, depression, these things that are very therapeutic in nature, substance abuse. But Ben, I want to ask you specifically, talk a little bit about this idea of hero to human. Yeah. And most people look at this lifestyle that you lived of 14 years, major leagues. You achieved every carrot that was set out for you, and yet it's still, you got to the top of the mountain and you look back and said, wow, I wasn't a human enough. I was too much of a hero. So talk a little bit about this idea and how it relates, especially around finding places to be human.
Yeah, well, one of the things that you experience when you're injured is a removal of the role that you normally have, right? Because you're no longer helping the team. So that's what's so difficult at times is all of a sudden I was in this role, now I'm just removed from it immediately. And you no longer can you be a hero for the team, right? So like heroes and athletes, like we have to actualize. What do? Humans have to grow. We have to grow and change and develop over time. But most often we are stuck in a role as a hero. We're all trying to be a hero. And look, every day you go to a job, they're asking you to be the best version of yourself. When you're talking to your kids, they want the best version of you, right? Like we don't want to be the worst version of ourselves for anybody in our lives. But the reality is we can't be at 100% in every role all the time. And I get it. We all want to be a hero all the time, but we can't do it. And so what happens when you are human, when you are hurting, when you are removed from the role and you are struggling and you don't know what to do with that? And I think that's where we have to have patience and grace, and we have to be gathering around each other so that it can be a season of growth. And that's what happened to me. When I went through this depression after the World Series, I had to find a new normal, a new way to keep growing in the game, because the game at that point had given me everything it really could give me. I had won championships. I had got the contracts. I was kind of on the downhill side. I mean, I was ready. I was ready to like retire basically, but I had a few more years to be a great part of this team and maybe win another championship, right? So none of those other guys wanted to cash it in, and so I couldn't cash it in. But the idea is, okay, if I don't have a carrot to go get, then what is it that's going to drive me for hope, to wake up in the morning, to keep doing this, to keep pushing? And that's where this idea of a growth mindset came into my frame of view. Look, you don't have to be in that particular role of the hero to be able to be growing. You can be broken in the moment, and you could be developing even more in that season than you would be if you were just the same machine on the field, just keep producing the stats, right? So we have this opportunity, no matter what we're experiencing on a surface level and what everybody else is seeing, we have this opportunity to grow as a human being, no matter whether we are the best version hero of ourselves or not. And so that's what's been so beautiful in this season of transition of, I was that, now I'm not that. I actually feel a lot more purpose in my life now with what I'm doing, as opposed to when I was just performing out on a ball field.
At Champion Forward, we talk about this three-step process. We talk about the importance to recognize so you can regulate, so you can respond. And when you recognize what you're feeling in your life, what's going on in your life, the patterns you have, that allows you to more effectively regulate in a healthy way. We talk about healthy coping. Regulate in a healthy way, which allows you to respond to whatever life brings you. The opposite of that is if we ignore instead of recognize, you become dysregulated. For those of you, I mean, you're the brain guy, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex, right? You're out of control, you're dysregulated, and then you react. And how many of us, when we react, regret what we do? And so we talk about going upstream. Okay, so Desmond Tutu said it best. He said, let's quit pulling people out of the river and let's walk upstream and figure out why they're falling in. And so right now we're doing so much symptom treatment, and I'm grateful for that. But I have a personal desire to walk upstream and figure out, well, what's making you fall in the river? And so when you have the ability to recognize what's going on in your world, it can make a massive difference. And one thing Dr. Sills and I talked about on a call as we were preparing for this, with this idea of prevention, being proactive instead of reactive. And I think you're seeing that now at the professional level. Can you talk about that proactivity and then maybe some tangible steps that even high school athletes or parents could take from a proactive standpoint?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes that we've seen in sports medicine over the last, again, 10 or 15 years is, we used to focus on treating injury, right? How do we go in treatment? Now we're looking back upstream and saying the best treatment is prevention. So how can we prevent these injuries? What can we really do to get athletes in a healthier state and kind of prevent? And I think that cuts across everything, whether we're talking about ankle injuries, knee injuries, or mental health issues, right? How can we be the best emotional and physical version of ourselves? Okay, to do that, it doesn't happen by accident, right? And if you think about physical injuries, it's training, it's conditioning, it's preparation, it's understanding the drivers, what's driving those injuries, and then going upstream and addressing those. The same is true for mental and emotional illnesses, right? What's driving them? What are the risk factors? Let's go back upstream and look at where those things might be getting accentuated or created and try to intervene there. And so that's been a big push in sports medicine. You see now at the NFL level, for example, every club has a mental health counselor or professional that's there on site, many of them employed by the clubs. But it's not just one person. They'll typically have that counselor, but also have others that work with that person, because not everybody relates to every type of person, right? Some people want an older person, some want a younger, some want male, some want female. So there's a need for sort of multiple people to do that. But I think it's not even just the job of those folks. And that's why I'm thrilled about your audience tonight, because think about the resource available at a typical high school. We talked about how it's wonderful that Bone and Joint and Williamson Medical Center provide an athletic trainer here, right? Do you realize that still today, nearly half of all U.S. high schools don't even have an athletic trainer? I mean, that's the reality out in the country. So we're really blessed here in Williamson County where it's expected. But even here, that athletic trainer's got to do football and basketball and wrestling and golf and tennis. And so that's a lot of athletes to keep charge on. And what that means is everybody in that sport community needs to have a little bit of awareness and sensitivity, right? Coaches, support staff, parents, other players, right? And you said something relevant earlier, I think, John, which is the old TSA motto, right? If you see something, say something. You don't have to be a mental health expert to say, you know what? Gosh, it just looks like that kid's struggling. Something's going on there. I want to make sure that I kind of connect them. So I think it's an ecosystem of care. It's focused around prevention. It's focused around the best version of each athlete. But that's the responsibility, not of the trainer, not of the team doc, but of everybody in that community, coaches, parents, and athletes themselves. And I think the best teams have great prevention strategies for physical, but also for emotional well-being.
Building off of that, you talk about prevention and you talk about everybody takes ownership in this process. And Ben mentions this a lot. He says you see whatever happens at the professional level will eventually trickle down into the college level. Whatever happens at the college level will eventually trickle down into the high school and amateur youth level. And we're seeing that play out today. I mean, there's many athletes here locally that are 15, 16 years old already getting financial opportunities. But with that comes a lot of expectation and clouded decision making. And I think about, I don't know if any of you were watching the NBA, but Tyrese Halliburton was NBA All-Star and had a tight calf in Game 6, Game 7, and he decided to play and ended up tearing his Achilles. So I'm not a surgeon, but I would go so far as to say that tight calf potentially led to that Achilles tear, or at least contributed to that. And so, Dr. Looney, I would love from your perspective is how do younger people, parents, coaches, there's so much pressure to play and to play now, and there's so much riding on it. How do they go about looking through the lens or the matrix to make the right decision based on an injury that will heal if you give it rest, but you could play through it? Talk a little bit about that from your perspective.
Yeah, that takes a lot of self-awareness, as an athlete to say, I'm not going to put myself in a position where I'm vulnerable, and I think that's that goes back to the prevention side of things, is teaching athletes, teaching athletes, well, this is a bruise I can play through versus I'm going to really hurt myself by being out there. And I think coaches are getting better about that a lot through things like this. Let's talking about what are things that athletes shouldn't be on the field for, and a lot of education. But honestly, there's still a lot of pressure, even at younger ages, and a lot of it comes from the parents to be out there, and I see it, and so it's important, as parents to realize, we want to see our sons and daughters on the field, but we don't need to, when they're hurt, we need to pull back and let our kids get better. Let's get them into physical therapy. Let's take a break, and sometimes. And sometimes kids will come in and they'll have multiple injuries, and it's a little bit of a cry for help because you feel the pressure that that the parents are putting on them.
And it's the compounding pressure that I was speaking with somebody else before this started is the pressure of, well, if my kid doesn't get into this program by this age, they're already behind.
That's right.
And would you say that's a myth?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And one thing I love to see on when you guys were mentioning it is I love to tell parents, that when you have that pressuring, sort of overbearing parent, is that if you single sport specialize your athlete at a young age, 12 and below, studies show they are much less likely to get a scholarship in that sport, and they're also much more likely to burn out or get hurt. And so I always say it's okay. He's injured, but he's going to be out there. Let's take a break and let's not perpetuate this injury. And let's be smart about it. And so a lot of this is engagement with the whole family sometimes, because there is some parental pressure in this environment. So,
can I offer something to that too?
Yeah.
With what I learned over the years in the training room, because I spent a lot of time in the training room toward the end of my career. If it is a large mechanical change, that it causes a mechanical change in the movement of the body, or if it causes a large mindset change in the mind. So here's an example. If I'm feeling bothered by something, and it's going to bother me a little bit, but if it's like all I can think about is this, it's like I'm afraid I'm going to hurt myself worse. Well, that's going to totally change how well I'm going to be able to think about the game out there. Okay, that's a mindset change. Mechanical change is this athlete, even though they might have a high pain tolerance, are they changing their mechanics that you would normally see? Because that's going to turn into injury, right, guys? Like that's a big problem. So look for, okay, is whatever they're feeling or whatever they're going through going to cause a big mechanical change or a big mindset change? And that's, if it doesn't matter if a coach or scout or somebody says, well, you got to play. Well, look, it's not going to be good for the athlete in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Ben, I want to ask you a question that I don't know if you've ever been asked before, but as you stepped into the batter's box in the 10th inning of that baseball game, what were you thinking in Game 7? No, I'm just kidding. He's probably been asked that like a million times. But in all seriousness, I want you to think of one thing that you learned during your career that really helped with your resiliency. I mean, you had access to a lot. One thing you learned during your career, but one thing you've learned after your career that you wish you would have known, that you've learned around this emotional intelligence space?
Sure. During my career, I think one of the things that I learned that really benefited me was probably just, in a general sense, the way to look at failure as an opportunity. I think it's very difficult for athletes to see even massive failures in games as opportunities. And it's a struggle for pro guys too. Like if they fail in a big situation, nobody wants to be known as a guy that chokes under pressure. And there's been plenty of guys that might have incredible careers, but they have a bad moment and they have to deal with that, right? So if you can see all moments, all failures as an opportunity to grow, that was a big thing during my career, I think, that helped me it also helped me in the moments when I was in the biggest pressure moments, because I was like, look, I've failed already before. Like, failure, whatever, like, then you can start to think about the possibility of what could happen. After, the biggest thing that made the biggest difference by far is to get connected to talking about emotions on a regular basis. And that's really a lot of what we do with Champion Forward. But just emotional intelligence work as an athlete, the sad thing is a lot of athletes, especially young American males, there's only two emotions that work on an athletic field that you can talk about. You can either be excited because everything's going well, keep the energy up, or you can be angry because things didn't go well. You can't be sad. You can't be ashamed. You can't feel lonely. You can't feel. There's lots of other emotions in the gamut of, and if you play sports so much and you're always trying to be tough, you never learn empathy very well, right? And you not only don't have it for yourself, you toxically shame yourself all the time as an athlete to try to be really good, or I just didn't learn that. There's some guys in this room that I have done emotional work with, and talked about since my career was over. And I'm like, why do professional sports not have this available? Like to be able to say, okay, yeah, guys, we just rah-rah, we crushed it out there for each other. We were heroes. Now let's go back and rewind. And the human that was inside of us living all that out, being the GOAT and the hero in the moment, now we got to go back and process that and return to normal. Like we didn't have that available at the time, and so that's part of what my initiative is, with not only with Champion Forward in the sports world, but when I even talk to the Chicago Cubs and I'm like, talking to pro guys, I want to eventually get to the part of doing a check-in. That's my goal with some of these people, because I know how much I would have needed it back in the day.
Ben, you talk a lot about at some point in time you will take the jersey off. The ball will stop bouncing. We've laughed about the NFL stands for not for long. I mean, I think it's the average baseball career is what, 3.5 years? Yeah, the average NFL career is about the same. So, Dr. Sills, talk about, guys in their late 20s, they're already done. Yeah. Talk about how we can be forward thinking in that your high school career will come to an end, your college career will come to an end. You're seeing that. Talk about from that perspective.
Yeah, well, it's a conversation that most athletes never think about until they get to that moment, right? Until they're facing either in the pro setting, it's usually an involuntary decision, right? They didn't make that decision. Everybody loves to have that vision of the guy who hits the last second shot and walks off the court and it's his last game. That happens about 0.0001% of the time. Most of the time it's a call like, hey, Ben, the guy upstairs would like to see you, right? And you're kind of, all of a sudden, boom, you're done. And it's an incredibly, incredibly difficult inflection point for athletes. But it's not just pro athletes, right? It might be in college, right? Or now even in high school. And so, I think we always talk to athletes about everybody's career ends at some point, right? It's just a matter of when. Back to what Ben said earlier, what's going to define you? What do you have to go towards after that? And I think people forget about that about pro athletes. Like you said, the average NFL player is 23, 24 years old. It's not Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. It's a really young kid who's barely out of college and is now dealing with all these pressures and things. So again, I think, as Ben said, defining yourself as an athlete versus finding things that are out there, and then having a support system in place that's not necessarily benefiting off you, the athlete, right? So many athletes are surrounded by people who are Athlete Inc. I'm making money off of you because of what you can do on the field. When you can no longer do something on the field, you don't have any value to me. You got to have some other people in your orbit besides those people, right? The people that just love you for who you are and were with you when you were just Ben or you were just their colleague or what have it. And I think finding those people gets tough. And then finding mentors who are outside, again, that sphere of immediate sort of day-to-day. That, I think, is something that's super important at every level, whether you're 14, 24, or 64.
I've heard it said that you can't build a foundation in a crisis.
Yeah.
And so that crisis comes when you get cut from the team. That crisis comes when that injury, happens. And so that's what we're so passionate about at Champion Forward, is helping you build that foundation. How do you get in the normal daily process of checking in with your emotions? How do you learn to normalize and navigate failure? How do you manage a success that comes and do it all in a healthy way? And so if it's okay with the three of you, I have about 10 minutes left. Is that okay if we maybe do 3 or 4 audience questions? Sure. Would that be all right? Sure. It's also been a kind of a heavy day the last few days in the sports realm. The Cubs lost Ryne Sandberg. That was really heavy. Obviously, there was the traumatic events in New York. And so there's a lot going on in the sports world. But I would ask that the questions maybe be specific to kind of your situation or feedback around that, less about anything. Ben, how you feeling about Ryne Sandberg passing away? I'm sure you got a lot of feelings. But, just let's keep it about that. But I would love to have 3 or 4 questions, and I can grab a mic, or if somebody can help and grab a mic. Does anybody have any questions? Otherwise, I could ask these guys questions all night. Any specific questions for any of these guys up here in front?
I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist at Duke, and I have a different problem from time to time, and that is seeing parents, particularly the mom of a youngster who needs very much to be in sports. But the parents are deathly afraid the child will get hurt. And, of course, I'm able to say, Duke Orthopedics kept my 3 sons going. And, the injuries are not that much at an earlier level, and we can fix them, and we can help you with the mental health issues of that. But that is a problem, that there are too many kids. They may have marginal skills, but they should be in team sports, and their parents won't let them for fear of getting hurt. How do you handle that?
Well, I was one of those athletes with marginal skills, so that's why.
And a lot of injuries.
Most orthopedic surgeons were athletes who got hurt, and so I think I think that that's a great point. This is my father. He's what got me interested in the mental health aspects of sports medicine. So. But gosh, I mean that's a great point. Is that we need to keep our kids engaged in athletics because it's good for them, right? It's good for them academically. It's good for their mental health, and so I mean that's an excellent point. So
And we can fix them. I mean, when they're young, we can certainly do that easy enough.
I think you're referencing.
Sometimes we can fix them when they're old, too.
Yeah. But maybe the media, I mean, we were talking about this even before it started, is the media is portraying messages of, well, you shouldn't play sports because you get a higher injury rate, when in fact the injury rate is quite low. And that's what we're passionate about at Champion Forward, is experiencing sports in a mentally and emotionally healthy way. We still want you to win. We still want you to get all of the great character development experiences that sports bring. We use this phrase a lot. It's a crucible for emotion. If you want to get just a really great experience, go to a 10U travel baseball team and watch the wave of emotion. I mean, you got tears, you got crying, you got parents cussing, you got them thrown out. I mean, it's unbelievable because it brings out things inside of us. And for whatever reason, we feel like that's an okay place to just let it loose. But that's the reality of sports, is that it brings up emotion, and that's when it reveals how you're able to regulate in healthy or unhealthy ways. But to your point, let's keep kids in sports. Yeah, that's right. Any other questions? We got one in the back.
Yeah. So, what is your advice for a young athlete like 7, 8, 9, 10, who's already hard on themselves for how they're performing?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard it.
That would be a great answer for Ben, because a lot of people don't know this story, but I get the opportunity to get to know Ben's parents, and this really sets this up well. But so Ben's dad was a pastor, but he's very dry. He has a very dry sense of humor, very monotone, just kind of, but very funny. And he said, John, I think this was on our podcast we did. You could probably go back and listen to it. He goes, John, I knew there was something wrong with him when he was 10 years old, and I was trying to go to bed with my wife, and I just heard dunk, 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 dunk in his room. I thought, what the heck's going on? So I went down to his room and I opened the door, and he's doing sit-ups at 10 p.m. And he said, I shut the door, came back up, said, Cindy, there's something wrong with our kid.
I think a lot of the hard on themselves at a young age is coming from the environment generally. Kids don't naturally do that. They do it if their environments are such that they are rewarded more, or they are looked better if they perform better, right? And so some kids are just naturally, they don't want to ever fail in anything, and they get mad even at 2-3 years old. You can see it in some kids, and that would have been me. I would have been the kid that, it didn't matter what I was doing. I wanted to win. And so if there was something to win and I didn't win, I was angry, and it was everybody else's fault but mine. I was screaming at referees when I was in 3rd grade, and my parents were like, hey, chill out. This is not what the whole world should be about. And I think to a certain degree that's one message that the primary caretakers need to start giving is, hey, look, this is not a big deal. Can you have fun? We want to make sure you're having fun doing this, because this is outside of school. You have to do. You don't have any choice. You can go mad, but you're going. But sports, at some level, at that age, it has to still be fun. If it's not fun, then there's something in the environment that is maybe not the best for that child at that time. They might need to be removed from it for a period of time to learn to have fun, to be able to then step back in and go, hey, this isn't all that the world is cracked up to be. It's okay. And the best, when I see these kids that are 17 or 16, 17, 18, that are the best, but they can also be laugh at themselves and be like, man, I really stunk. But, they kind of shrug their shoulders. That is a healthier kid, right? Because they're really, really good, and they have a high standard. So you're not trying to lower standards for them and say, no, you don't want to be your best. They have a high standard, and they can get mad in the moment, but afterwards they're like, they turn the page quickly, and they don't they don't say negative things themselves. Self-talk is a really, really important thing to learn at a young age. And let me tell you who it starts with. Parents, us. If we talk to ourselves negatively, whether you're talking about the dinner that you made, or you stubbed your toe on something and you say something negative about your kids are learning that stuff, right? So we have to talk to ourselves in a positive way, and sometimes we have to turn around their negative self-talk and help them say, hey, you're okay, and help them say it a different way, because it's natural to say negative self-talk. You have to unlearn that and sometimes relearn something new.
We got probably time for 1 or 2 more questions. Yeah.
I have one. On the flip side of the struggling youth player, how do you combat the 16, 17, 18-year-old that can't shrug off the 0-for-4 game, and then it compounds into 3 games in a row, and we're trying to get recruited, but we're worried about social media and videos and Game Changer and all the new stuff? How do you combat as a coach if there's no mental health specialists there for the organization or in the high school? What do you do from the coach's standpoint, or that secondary sorts you guys were speaking about? What is the best action?
Well, that's exactly why we developed Champion Forward stuffs for coaches and parents, to have a plan and to get clear on how they can help an athlete that's in that moment. So that would be my number one thing to do, as far as learning some of the techniques and things that you can do. But in short, the way I would answer that question is that athlete is probably, they probably really struggle with their own inability to move beyond that moment. They're stuck in the past. They're stuck in, things that have already happened. And the game is passing them by. They struggle with the ability to be present. Because if it's already happened and they're still stuck in it, they're not present where they are at that moment. Right? So mindfulness is a really important key to learning how to stay present and figure out what you're feeling right now. But there's a good chance those athletes have never been slowed down enough to go, hey, what are you feeling right now? And what is it tied to? And that's some of the work that we do with Champion Forward. but we teach the parents and the coaches how to do it first, right? Because if we don't know how to do it, how are we ever going to teach the young athletes how to do it, right? And that's what I wish I would have had. I wish somebody would have been saying, hey, slow down. I know there's a lot. You've had 3-4 bad games in a row. You're 0 for 12. You've struck out 6 times. Like, it's not looking good, right? I'm going to be honest with you. It doesn't look good. However, let's slow this down a little bit, and let's get grounded with where we're at and what we need in the next moment, and that's a really important mental cue that even guys that are professionals, they have to learn how to do, especially baseball players, because the next game is coming. There's more offers coming if you don't turn the page and learn how to stay present with where you're at right at that moment.
Were you 0 for 13 when you started your career?
I sure was. Thanks for bringing it up.
I have a really crass, non-scientific way that I like to illustrate that with my players, okay? This
29 years of experience.
It's probably going to get me fired. I have 2 Labrador retrievers, okay? And so I will go out in the backyard and pick up one of the deposits they've left, and I'll put it in a Ziploc bag. And I take it to practice. And I ask my players, do you guys know what this is? And they're like, oh, coach, what? And I'm like, okay, yep, it's a dog turd. Yep, that's what it is. How many of you guys would like to put that in your pocket and carry it around? I'm like, oh, no, coach, what are you doing? I'm like, okay, no, that's not just what that is. That's a strikeout. That's an error. That's giving up a bomb on the mound, okay? That's what those things are. When you take those things and you put them in your pocket and you carry them around, they're going to weigh you down. They're going to hold you back, right? You can't get away with that. You got to learn to take that thing and get it out of there. Put it in the bag and put it in the garbage can, And of course, the players think I've lost my mind, but I'm just trying to illustrate for them, you can't carry around that negativity. It's got to be, as you said, in the moment, present. And so every now and then I'll have to remind them, hey, don't carry the dog turd around, okay? Because it just, you can see guys that kind of sit there and do that. The other great illustration I saw is, I read that Nick Saban did this, and so I stole it from him. He puts a little piece of plywood down on the ground, and he gets his players to take the shoes off. And he asks them to walk across it. And of course, they can do that, right? And he asks them to do it again. Then he tells them to do it with their eyes closed. And they do it, and they do it with their eyes closed. And he said, okay, now what if I took that board, that same board, and I put it about 20 feet in the air? Could you do that? And they're like, no, coach, I wouldn't do that. Like, well, why not? It's the same board. You just did it. You did it with your eyes closed. Why can you do it when it's here, but you can't do any up there? And there's a very simple reason, right? It's the fear of failure. Right? When I'm up there, the consequences of failing are quite a bit more than they are down here. And so it's that fear of failure and that fear of that consequence that locks us up physically. So I thought that was a great illustration that he gave. And
yeah, if you haven't yet, grab your journal and start drawing a dog. No, just kidding. But that's a great illustration, right? And I think to your comment as a coach, that was actually one thing I was going to add is the level of consequence that player is creating in their mind is irrational most of the time. And the more consequence, the more fear that builds up, the more paralyzed we get. And we don't say what we do unlocks performance, but we're seeing that a free player typically finds flow easier. And a free player is someone that is able to process, and sorry for the graphic illustration, but isn't emotionally constipated. And so that's what I would encourage you to do is think about, how do I make this player not emotionally constipated? Well, they need to process their emotions. He needs to process what he's feeling. He's feeling shame. He's feeling fear. Am I going to ever do this again? I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling humiliated, whatever it is. All right, great. Keep processing that. Keep showing up. And as we land the plane in the event tonight, for those of you, I referenced that card in your journals there. There's some QR codes that you can scan. For Champion Forward, we have 2 ways that you can really get involved in what we do. One is an experiential program called an ambassador program. It's an 8-week experience we've designed for parents and coaches, athletic directors, wherever you find yourself, all walks of life. We've trained about 75 or 80 people in this program so far. The feedback has been 2 thumbs up. Our next one's launching in August. I think we might be full. We might have 1 or 2 spots, August 19th maybe. We're just wrapping up the other one next week. The other one that we're launching early September is called our training system. So we have an individual side that will be for families that you can access that, video-based training, all through an online training portal, or an organizational system. So if you're a high school athletic director, you're a travel sports program, we want to be getting these tools that Ben referenced, are 5 tools with training videos in your hands. So you can go to that QR code, check out our website. There's more to learn about Bone and Joint, about Williamson Health Foundation. As Lee referenced, you can sponsor a child. We have had a few athletic trainers in our program, and they have talked about how impactful our program was for them and how equipped they were to have conversations. And I'll never forget a physical therapist sitting there and going, I had an athlete tell me, I've never talked to anybody about this, but I wanted to talk to you. And when I hear that, I'm like, bingo. That's awesome. But what I will also say is that all of us at Champion Forward, as well as most athletic trainers, are not mental health professionals. And so we really find ourselves in the strength and conditioning side of the mental and emotional health environment. And so what happens is when you start utilizing a lot of our tools, things come up that need more attention. When you're at a physical therapist appointment, something might come up with your knee. You might hurt yourself where you need to go see the orthopedic surgeon. It's the same thing with our tools. And so we also believe strongly in getting engaged with trained health professionals when the time is right. And if you think the time is right, it's already too late. No, get in. Seriously, I have my own story. Ben has his own story. I can't speak for these other guys, but talk to a counselor, talk to a therapist, some of that proactive approach. I grew up in a house where therapy was the last resort. Never went. It probably would have changed my life. But now it's from a proactive standpoint. Find somebody, talk to somebody. There's Find Help Franklin there on the front part of that, where if something struck you tonight where you said, I need to talk to somebody, or I need my child to talk to somebody, or we just need some help. We are destigmatizing the conversations because it's really, really important. As we end tonight, did anybody celebrate their birthday today on July 29th with us tonight? Lindsay? Oh, okay. It wasn't yours, though. Does anybody have a birthday in the next week? Next 2 weeks. Your birthday, when is it? Tuesday? Happy birthday. Big round of applause for your birthday. You got this amazing gift that we put together. Yeah, this is full of everything. It's full of hat and baseballs and suntan lotion and 2 tickets to the Caribbean and Cubs tickets and everything. So, no, I'm just kidding, but hats and stuff like that. But thank you all so much for coming. I'm not sure if you all have a few minutes to hang out or if you need to take off, but thank you all. As I mentioned, consider this a catalyst. A seed planted tonight, and think about 1 or 2 things that stuck with you in your sphere of influence for the impact that you can have. But please give these 3 guys a round of applause. You have one last thing? Yeah.
Sorry. I just want to say one thing real quick. One of the key mental performance indicators for even pro players now is team communication and cohesion. And if you think, I'm not an athlete, or I'm just a mom, or I'm just a whatever, like I'm a sister or a brother or whatever of the athlete, okay? As these guys will tell you, every person involved in their experience is a very important part of their team. And the better y'all communicate and connect together as a group, whatever that athlete ends up doing or becoming is a very important part of the process. So thank you for being the connections to this community and the athletes here. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.